For our inquiry project, we've been focusing on raising vaccination rates in the Bay Area. This is the sound of a baby with whooping cough. In between its fits of coughing, its little body must struggle for air. Its lips often turn blue, and the babies often die.
This is completely unnecessary. We have an invention that's been around for over 100 years, although in different forms, that could save these lives. Vaccines are one of the greatest inventions modern medicine has produced, and they have contributed to a huge decline in diseases worldwide. In fact, smallpox was completely eradicated in 1979, thanks to a global effort by the World Health Organization as well as private backers. Other diseases have also experienced a massive decline, including, but not at all limited to, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, diphtheria, and so many more. Despite this, vaccines remain a divisive topic in the Bay Area. Well, they really shouldn't. Some parents claim that they put undue strain on children's immune systems. Others think that they cause autism. But none of this is true. And the lack of vaccinations is really causing a huge decline in public health. All of this is a huge issue. And it also causes other issues, as Henry will now talk about.
Recently in the Bay Area, there have been outbreaks of tuberculosis, measles, and a rare polio-like disease. These are all spread through sneezing and poor hygiene, not washing your hands.
But what caused all this anti-vaccine craze? Well, a large part of it is due to Andrew Wakefield and his fraudulent 1998 study claiming that vaccines cause autism. First, let me take a second. Here. Does it make it clear enough? Vaccines do not cause autism. The scientific community has overwhelmingly agreed that there is no link between those two things. And yet some parents in the anti-vaccine movement have taken his study to heart. And because of this, public health is being endangered. I almost forgot to mention, not only was his study bad, he was stripped of his medical license by a British review board for numerous ethical violations. His study on autism was 12 children at a birthday party, where he paid them $5 each for a blood sample. This man has no credibility, and yet his practices and ideas are still believed by many. The anti-vaccine movement also has gained steam from some Jenny McCarthy, a celebrity or reality TV show star, who claimed that her son had contracted autism from vaccines. First off, autism is a genetic disorder. You can't contract it. It develops over time. And second off, she has no scientific background. Yet these two kooks, pretty much, are still believed by many. Interestingly enough, wealth and privilege do determine who listens, but not in the way you might think. If you look at public schools in San Francisco, across the board, there is a very high vaccination rate. There is something called a personal leave exemption under California law, or PBE, that allows parents to not vaccinate their children before kindergarten. The percentage of those filing for it is low in all Bay Area public schools. However, in two more affluent neighborhoods, Pacific Heights and Twin Peaks, the PBE percentage rises. And then if we look at the private schools, PBEs rise across the board. Everywhere, nowhere more than Pacific Heights and the neighboring schools in the Western Addition. PBEs there's a higher percentage of PBEs than there is in public schools. This shows us that wealth and education definitely affect this, but more education, in fact, hurts the rate of vaccinations. The solution is not necessarily more general education, it's more targeted education. More education designed to combat the misinformation out there and get more parents to vaccinate. Without vaccines, we would have so many more outbreaks of horrible diseases. This is a graph of whooping cough since 1922. Notice that the cases stay fairly high up until the 1950s and 60s, when vaccines become more prevalent. But then from 1990 to 2010, whooping cough cases are on the uptick again. Why? Because parents are not vaccinating. They just don't feel it's necessary. However, that's not true. But vaccines do have issues, and it would be unfair for us to not mention those. For example, they can cause a mild allergic reaction in small segments of the population. They also have been known to produce mild fevers in certain cases. Children whose immune systems are compromised often cannot handle the stress of a vaccine placed on that system, and therefore they cannot be vaccinated. There's also an extremely rare syndrome known as Guillain-Barré syndrome, which can be a result of vaccinations. However, as I said before, it is extremely rare. At its highest rate during the 1970s, it was at a 1 in 100,000 incidence rate, which is an 0.00001% rate. You're more likely to die of numerous other things before you ever come close to contracting that. How? And it is precisely because of the children whose immune systems are compromised that we need vaccinations. There's something known as herd immunity, whereby if enough people in the population are vaccinated, then a disease does not have enough carriers and dies out. The children who cannot be vaccinated rely on herd immunity for their own safety, because since they're not protected from these diseases, if the diseases do not die out from herd immunity, they are vulnerable to the full force of these diseases. And so we definitely need to do something about it. But what?
We think that we should implement the Calgary Law, which requires all students that are not up to date on vaccinations to stay home. They will be able to take tests and do work, but they just can't be at school with the other vaccinated kids. Also, we should target parents with more information so there's less misinformation. And pediatricians are actually ready to set up modified schedules in order to accommodate parents with special needs and
concerns. Because of this, while it's not ideal, we think that we could perhaps introduce a modified schedule for some parents who otherwise would not vaccinate. But all of this and more, the education, the staying home from school, all of these laws combined could continue the trend that we've had since the 1950s and 60s of diseases disappearing and declining.